Hello and welcome to Nothing Exempt. I am Brian Piotr and I am here with my co-host Nicholas Pardini. And this show today is brought to you by the Cause and Effect Report. If you'd like to go check it out, go to causeandeffectreport.com. So today's episode was supposed to be with Russell Napier, but he couldn't make it today. Hopefully we can get him back sometime. So the backup topic of the day is going to be future transport. One of the most popular things for, the popular science and popular news crowd to write about how we're going to travel around the world in a couple of hours and how cars are going to be able to drive themselves. You just get in and go to sleep and wake up on the other end. And all these things that are promising futuristic things that everybody hopes for. But the show today is a little bit of discussion about what we think will actually happen and what the current state of transportation actually is like today and air travel and what we think is going to happen next. So, Nick, this is a very broad topic. Is there something you want to start off with? Maybe what's your experience with traveling today?
Yeah, I mean, I probably fly 2 times a year round trip on average, and it hasn't. My experience hasn't really changed that much over, except for when I got TSA global entry. It's made my security waits a little faster, but that much in the last 15 years. So, and I don't expect it to change that much, honestly, in the foreseeable future. I think you're going to see more innovation in ground transportation, such as driverless vehicles and also the driverless RVs. The idea that instead of flying a lot of destinations, it actually makes more sense time wise and definitely more sense hassle wise if your family just gets in like a nice upscale RV and that drives while you're sleeping at night. It saves you a night at a hotel, and you don't have to go through the hassle of airports, and it's probably a lower cost.
Yeah, well, as far as airlines, all the growth over the last 10 years has been transitioning away from the transition that started in the 80s has continued to lower budget, more seats, lower cost per mile. How can I get you the cheapest fare? And if I take your baggage out of it, will you buy a ticket? If I take your drinks out of it, will you buy a ticket? If I charge you for everything and you can get from A to B cheaper than ever before, but you can't have anything. That's been the model that everybody's trying to mess around with the rise of these low budget carriers like Ryanair and Spirit Airlines. The flight experience has gotten way worse. I happen to be 6'6", and Nick, you're not short either. But the amount of available legroom, the thickness and comfort of the chairs, everything's been taken down to the bare bones, because consumers are saying, I can be uncomfortable like pins and needles everywhere in my body, and I hate life for 2 hours if I can get my family of four from California to Colorado for $50 less a ticket. So that's been the movement that everybody's been going. And at the same time, those airlines, they're not moving faster. The Concorde has been down for like 20 years now. And supersonic flight is something that a lot of people have been working on, like Boeing and Boom Supersonic and different airlines talk about, but it's not clear that that's ever going to be mass market. It may always be first class, business class, people who can afford to pay for the time. But Nick, what trade-off would you get on a transatlantic flight to save 3 hours? How much money would you pay for a premium on that flight?
It's really proportionate to my income, to be honest with you. Like, if I was doing very well financially and I just didn't really, I cared more about speed versus and comfort versus time and like versus cost, I would pay a lot for that. I'd probably pay 50% more ticket price.
But I think the trade-off is probably going to be more like 5 times more, 3 times more, 4 times more. It's going to be a big difference to be able to go supersonic. I think that's what we saw with Concorde. Comparable first class slow boat to
I'd
The
rather take a
Concorde.
slow boat business class if it's the same cost because I could sleep.
Yeah, well, that's something that I've always heard people can do on
That's
airplanes.
that's my cost line. That's probably accurate. If it's cheaper than business class, I would do it. If it's not, I wouldn't.
Would you ever be comfortable enough to get into a rocket to go anywhere?
Um, I don't really know. It depends what the interior of the rocket's like and the turbulence and all the other stuff.
But your impression of what you think it's like now, your imagination, do you ever see yourself taking a rocket from here to Dubai if it meant saving you 15 hours?
That depends on what the safety record is,
No,
honestly.
you have to go with what you think it would be. Let's pretend that it it's become a developed technology and not a lot of people have died on it yet, though some people inevitably will, just like aircraft.
I'd probably do it.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people would make the trade for the time and the novelty of going into space probably is
Have
also
you
a
ever flown business class or first class on a plane?
nope. I've gotten the exit row, and that's the limit to my upward mobility on an airplane.
Okay. I mean, it doesn't make any difference if you're within North America. But if you're going to fly across an ocean or you're going to fly down to South America, it makes your life so much better because these newer planes, you can have it completely fold down like a bed. And you basically, what I did when I flew to Chile, you fall asleep when you're in Miami and you wake up in Santiago.
Sounds great. I took a 20-hour flight from LA to Melbourne because of a 2-hour delay in the beginning before liftoff, and I did not sleep for 1 minute.
Yeah, I know. I've flown most of the flights I've flown in my life internationally have been coach, and even with the help of sleep pills, I couldn't sleep at all.
Yeah, well, talking about what I actually think is going to happen is this trend will bottom out, and perhaps supersonic travel will happen on the high end. But my guess about the future is that it's not going to include supersonic flight in this atmosphere for the average vacationer or businessman. You know, if you're not willing to put out the big bucks, because the penalties you pay for drag and the current cost of gasoline just means that it's going to cost more. And you also have to have a more robustly designed aircraft that they sell less of. So you have to amortize hundreds of millions of dollars of engineering time over less aircraft. So the aircraft's going to cost more. So it's all going to add up to a high ticket price. I don't think the average guy is ever going to get the opportunity.
How low does crude oil have to be to make Concorde viable?
Concorde back then to be viable, it needed to be able to fly over ground. The reason why it wasn't viable for the large part was because it was illegal to fly over the mainland United States and Europe because of the sound restrictions for the sonic boom. So the biggest limitation that the future planes have to overcome is how to create an aircraft that can fly high enough and affect the sonic boom in a way enough to lower the sound on the surface of the earth so that the FAA and Europe will allow them to fly at supersonic speeds over the ground.
Yeah, but couldn't they just be at supersonic speeds to the ocean part and slow down to normal speeds when they get to this?
No, that's what Concorde had to do. Concorde was only a Concorde supersonic aircraft over the Atlantic. And limiting that aircraft to just one route was a huge problem.
Yeah, but I mean, I can see so many routes in the Pacific Rim where that would be very beneficial.
Well, the Concorde didn't have that range. You burn a lot more gas to go fast. So they didn't build a plane that could do it. You need to actually design a supersonic aircraft that could travel that far. And I don't know if it's possible or feasible to do that because you have to burn so much more gas to go that fast. And every time you add space on the plane for gas or luggage or people, which you're trying to fit all of those on there, you increase the drag. which compounds your problem when you're trying to go fast. But as far as what I think the next step is, the next major revolution that people don't talk about, but it is in the sphere of influence. Like a lot of people are talking about it in the industry, but it's not something that the public has picked up on yet. Is I'll explain what happened in the 80s. We used to have a navigator on most flights. And as we built up GPS and better navigational systems, you'll notice that there's only two people at the front of every plane now. And for the last 40 years, we've had just the pilot and the co-pilot up at the front. We got rid of the navigator on every airplane because we replaced him with technology. Well, we're moving up on a time in history where the co-pilot is going to be one human to the computer. We might make a UAV type co-pilot to a person at first, but we're already at a stage where a lot of planes can land and take off and fly themselves. And so the risk of a pilot dying and having a heart attack and having no pilot on the plane can be reduced to zero. That's already a pretty rare event, but say that it actually happens, it can be reduced to zero with ground-based controllers and computers. So just like the Global Hawk can fly around the world and bomb stuff in Iraq or Oman or Yemen or whatever and fly back with this huge range completely piloted in Nevada, we could do the same thing with aircraft. You could have a co-pilot sitting in Nevada that only takes over in case of emergency. Or like the pilot on the plane says, hey, I'm going to the bathroom, watch my controls for 5 minutes. Like, we're not that far away from that being allowed by regulators. I'd say within the next 10 years, which is pretty fast in aerospace. And then when you can cut that guy out for another 10 years, maybe another 20 years, and there's only been one pilot on the plane for forever, and he hasn't flown the plane because computers have been flying him the whole time. At some point, everybody flying will be comfortable with not having any pilots on board. I feel like almost nobody would be comfortable with that today. But if you had 20 years where there was only one guy on board and he hasn't been flying really, it's been a computer the whole time, and everybody's just comfortable with it, we can finally make the transition to having pilots off the plane, computers or remote.
I mean, if you go that plus the bare bones services coverage, would you have any staff on a plane other than maybe one mechanic?
I don't think you need a mechanic. You probably will still have somebody on the plane. But what's really cool is, one, you don't need those windows in the front if there's no people on board. Those windows that pilots use to see out of, they require a lot of structure, a lot of money, a lot of weight. It's a huge pain to put those windows in up front in an angle so that they can see out. You could increase the aerodynamics, make it a perfectly aerodynamic shape in the front with no windows, no structure for windows, have the weight reduced, and then you could move seats all the way up to the front, or you could have the lavatory up at the very front or whatever. Like you could actually have a first class cabin. You know, you'd have to put windows back in if people want them, but you could actually have a first class cabin up where the pilots are with the best view in the house.
Couldn't you replace the windows with like a screen?
Yeah, people have considered that. We're also at a time where people don't want that. So there's no problem with doing that today. But everybody right now says they don't want that. They want to be able to see out of the plane. They don't want to be in a tube. So there's no reason we couldn't already do that. There have already been concepts put up by NASA and other people with screens. You could put a screen on the whole floor of the plane and make it so that it looks like you're seeing the ground right below you. Right?
Wow.
Like you could make a giant floor screen with a camera on the bottom of the airplane so you can see 30,000 feet down if you just look down. Like there's no limitations to technology. It's a matter of those business decisions actually being made.
Yeah, so I mean, based on all of this, always the biggest problem with airlines historically has been the cost of their staff and union negotiations. And crude oil is the other main driver of cost. if you have oil reasonably kept in check and you're able to cut staff quite a bit just because of diminished in-flight services and less need for pilots, I mean that's a really bullish scenario for the airline sector.
It is a really bullish sector to be in the first place because they're growing all over the third world. That's as income levels rise, people want to be able to fly in places like India and the Southeast Asia. And just on that, it's a bullish picture that everybody around the world is starting to fly in countries that had never been able to fly before. It was out of reach. It was a first world only thing. Now we're entering a phase where everybody can fly because of these low costs. But it's also bullish because the pilots are a really expensive portion of your staff. So if you can limit that and sell some more seats, you had 2 seats and take away a pilot, that's a huge delta. Instead of negative 100,000, each seat brings in hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So one pilot from one seat, you're netting a couple $100,000 on that aircraft. If you had 4 seats and take away one pilot, you're just made $1 million on every aircraft like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. So outside airlines, what do you think about land and sea transportation?
I don't have very many opinions on sea transportation. There actually, I do have something to say. There's this problem coming for all the sea container ships around the world. They're allowed to use the dirtiest oil of anybody, any kind of moving object. The bunker oil, bunker fuel, it's really dirty. And we're coming up on a time when a lot of major ports around the world are going to outlaw the use of that oil. So we're talking a 20 or 30% rise in the cost of fuel if you want to go to LA or the port of San Francisco. Or
LA is the most important port in the United States for international trade. So, and Long Beach.
Yeah, I
Long
know a
Beach.
lot of these, all the American ports are going to come up against this, especially wherever there's a Democrat controlled state where they're going to say you can't have, they're already doing things like you can't run on your engines when you're in port. You have to plug in electronically. And there's this huge cost for that infrastructure to run these giant wires out to the boats so that they can run everything without running their engines. But just in terms of the fuel they're going to be allowed to use, we're talking like the next 2 years, there's some big transitions coming on some of the bigger ports. And that's about the end of what I know about that. But I know it's going to be a huge cost increase for a lot of shipping companies if they want to go to some ports, especially environmentally controlled, Democrat controlled ports.
But I mean, I think I'd see the same in European ports and Chinese ports.
You're going to see it in European ports. You may see it in Chinese ports, but I don't have any news. I have no idea what will happen in China.
I mean, I don't have any news on either, but China's really trying to do something about its air quality.
But some of the Chinese ports are 10 miles off the coast. No joke. Like some Chinese ports are really far offshore.
Why?
And if the winds could, so that they can have deep water ports. So if you want to have a port where you have a shallow shelf, you can either dig trenches everywhere or you can go build a port. Like one of the biggest ports in the world, I forget what city it's in, but it's in China. It's 10 miles off the coast. They built a man-made island for it so that they could dock bigger and badder ships. And there's a 10-mile bridge that's just got semi-trucks going each way all day long. Plus, you also get the advantages of if you have one bridge in and out of a port, you have more control over that port authority. And ports, like Harold Malgrim said, or have always been traditionally a place for corruption to exist. So if you don't have a way for people to get in and out of the port except through one bridge, you just put one cop there and it's more efficient.
Yeah.
But and then automotive traveling, I think the time where you're going to be able to go to sleep and wake up at your destination is more like 10 years away, even though everybody thinks it's close. Everybody thinks that's like a couple of years away. We're going to see it working for many years before it's going to be allowed and be popular.
Well, I think it's going to be in stages. The first is going to be commercial trucking because the cost of a driver is up to 37% of the cost of a trucking business. And if you can reduce that cost, it needs a huge margin. And also, these trucks are mainly restricted to highways anyway,
I
and they'll
agree,
have
and especially when you can do nighttime running. And also the government puts restrictions on how many hours a driver is allowed to drive, but there's no restrictions on robots. So if they can allow robots to drive for 14 hours straight and a man can only drive 8 hours in a day, then there's an advantage there even without the cost difference.
yeah. So that I think that's going to come first. The second thing that's going to come is the RVs, whether as vacation alternatives or in more expensive cost of living cities like New York and San Francisco, residential alternatives.
I mean, it'd be really cool if you could have a place to park your RV that was an hour's drive away and you just said, "Go put yourself away in storage, please, until next time I need you."
Yeah,
And
I
then
see it.
summit it, have it go to the waste system and fill up with water and dump sewage for you by itself, and you stay at your campsite. Like, there's a lot of things that'd be really cool about this idea, but I think that would also be a really difficult thing to automate.
I mean, I think the only challenge is that if these urban city centers, they may not have the infrastructure to park and drop off all these commuters who are coming in via RV.
Nick, RVs are hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's not
Yeah,
going to be everybody.
no, I did the math on this. If you buy a top of the line luxury RV and you have a monthly payment of $1,300 a month, that's way cheaper than anything you can rent in San Francisco.
I get that it's cheaper to live in an RV, but most
And
cities
that's a
don't have the
nice
problem.
RV.
Most cities, you can get something nicer in an actual house if you're willing to drive 40 minutes.
Yeah,
But
but this one you don't have to
maybe,
drive 40 minutes. You sleep or get ready, and then it'll drop you off near your office.
yeah, well, I would believe that if it was ever a problem, it would happen in San Francisco and maybe not any other city.
No, I could see it happening in New York and possibly Los Angeles.
Well, New York's got these limitations that would make that less economic. So I'm not sure about New York. You have to get in and out of New York. But,
It's the same as San Francisco. You have to
well,
get in and out of there.
you're not wrong. You're right. San Francisco's bridge only too for a lot of the different ways you want to get there. So we'll have to wait and see if that can actually happen. I do think that self-driving bus and self-driving RV are probably last. I would put semi trucks and then personal cars and then RVs.
I'd flip the script. I think personal cars are coming last.
Well, just think of actual RV companies having that ability and the capital and the know-how. They're at the bottom of the list for people that have the motivation and the money to do it. They're small companies.
Yeah, but there's a lot more cars on the road, so transitioning personal cars is going to be a lot more of a political and safety risk.
Yeah, maybe. But regulators can also ignore RV companies and not be annoyed by any lobbyists, really, because the lobbyists for Ford and GM and Toyota are all going to be more well funded. So there'll be more motivation on that side via funding than and lobbying than on the RV side. So when the regulators can just ignore you for like an RV getting approved, there's no motivation for them to do anything. There's no pressure for them to go do it.
Mhm.
What do you
Yeah,
think, listeners? What do you think? You think that you'll see a self-driving RV where the next generation beyond millennials are going to be driving to work in it, getting ready, showering on the freeway, getting dropped off at their office, and then sending the bus off someplace while they go to work? So, Nick, if you got a opportunity, would you, if if Tesla or somebody else built the self-driving car, would you get one?
Um, I mean, I don't know about with Tesla, given the fact they've had some safety issues compared to other car companies. But um, yeah, if there was like a driverless car out there, I'd probably be one of the early adopters because I personally don't like driving. I like the freedom of driving and not having to rely on Uber or public transportation, but I don't actually like the practice of driving.
Well, you've missed out, Nick. I feel like you should buy a manual drive car. I've never owned one, guys, but I feel like this is the recipe for Nick to love driving. I think you need to get a small sports car that's manual and drive that everywhere for a couple of years. That's not in Orange County where you can only go 5 miles an hour.
Well, I mean,
And
you
then
could
maybe you'd
like
love
Orange
it.
County has pretty wide, fast streets, especially Newport Beach and Irvine. But um, yeah, I mean, I've never driven a manual car in my life. I have no idea how to do that, and I'm left-handed when it comes to things like that. Probably doesn't help matters.
Yeah, but that means you've never really done anything that would connect you to driving. Like you just driving somebody's generic car from A to B through traffic is not a way to enjoy driving. Nobody likes doing that.
Well, I mean, I think would be maybe it would be fun. I mean, I haven't done it past a go kart level. Would be high speed racing.
Like Formula One or NASCAR.
Well, like going to the Porsche track in LA
Oh,
with my
doing
buddy.
like paying to go around a track on your sports car.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be fun, I think. I actually got a Groupon for that and then never went. It was like you're allowed to do 4 laps or 3 laps or something, but you had to
And
drive all the way to Pasadena to do it.
well, there's one that's on the 405 by Carson. But the thing is the other thing is maybe like if I had relived my life, I maybe would have considered trying to pursue being an F1 driver.
Yeah, I think that is a very admirable wish, but gosh, I don't think my skills and my body type or anything would ever give me the shot at that.
Yeah, I don't
Like,
know how good my reflexes are, to be honest with you. I'm not the most quick twitched person.
well,
That's why I'm not.
if you look at all those Formula One drivers, they're all a lot smaller than me. Like weighing 50 pounds less is an advantage
Well,
when
yeah.
you when you
I
were
mean,
talking about G forces
I
and
don't know
acceleration.
about how you fly on planes, Brian, because I'm about average height for like a white American male. I'm like 6 foot, and I feel I can barely fit on plane.
Is hell, Nick. Is hell. It's awful. I hate it.
So how does anybody taller than me fit on a plane?
I don't fit on a plane. My knees touch the backs of every single seat that I sit behind. I have to tell the person that sits in front of me at the very beginning, I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry, madam. You are not reclining your seat this flight. And then, like, I've had people try. I've had people, like, sneakily try to do it a little bit at a time, like, get away with it. But I'm like, my knees are in your back. And those seats, I can just push with my knees and push you back to upright. It's not that hard. So you can't do it, and you can't
You,
sneakily do it. You can't get away with it. I'm touching the back of your. I'm trying to put my knees into your lower back and give you a kneading by just sitting here.
have
And
you
so,
tried? Have you gotten into conflicts about this?
yeah, when I flew to Australia, 20 hours, the lady in front of me did not speak any English, and so she did not understand why I kept pushing her chair forward when she kept trying to recline it every like 4 hours, 3 hours. But she didn't try to yell at me, and we didn't have a conversation about it because we couldn't. but, but it was pretty annoying when you're really, really tired and you've been up for 35 hours and somebody tries to recline their seat into your knees and it hurts and you push it right back. But that's just the world we live in.
Well, we'll end it at that. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you'd like to know more, please go to our Reddit or our Twitter at Nothing Exempt.
Okay. And if you're watching on YouTube, hey guys, what do you think of my blue and orange? It's football season. Preseason just started, and I'm wearing my Broncos shirt with a blue blazer to take the season off. And if you want to watch football, I got nothing to sell you as far as from me. But one of the best ways to do it is to get a VPN, change your um, domain to outside of North America, and then purchase NFL Red Zone through Britain or Europe or wherever, and then it's only like $150 for the whole season, Red Zone and everything, and you just have to log in through the country that you bought it in. So I log in through Britain, and I don't have to pay for DirecTV, and I can watch any game I want. And you can do the same thing with baseball or pretty much any other sport. Wherever there's a VP like a VPN workaround to the people trying to block you from watching what you want to watch with blacklists.
Well, I mean, I think the only sport I consider doing that for would be the NBA, and the cost, or college football, and the cost of those in America, I don't think is that much more expensive than it is abroad. So it's not worth it for me.
Yeah,
That
well,
makes sense.
DirecTV has a deal that nobody else can stream all the games in Red Zone and everything in North America. So you have to pay for DirecTV every month to do it. If you have anything else, you have to wait for the games to be over to watch them delayed.
Yeah.
But you can get around it. Hopefully DirecTV loses enough money they don't renew that contract, and then we can watch it online like Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I'm not really a big NFL fan, so but yeah, it'll be a next show we could talk about is our views on the NFL.
Yeah, I'd love it if nobody else was an NFL fan, so that I could get cheap tickets and enjoy it all on my own.
Because I've mentioned on the show about the World Cup, I'm not very optimistic about the future of the NFL.
Yeah, but what about fantasy football or fantasy baseball or fantasy anything?
It's a waste of time.
Of course, it's a waste of time. That's implied when in the question. That wasn't a very good response, Nick. But what you're saying is you're bad at it.
No, I just don't do it.
I don't.
I did 1 year in high school. I did fantasy football. I didn't do anything other than the draft, and I won.
Oh well, I'll tell you right now that I am bad at it, and you have to be really focused on it like it's the stock market. Every week and every little bit of news, you have to be trading and moving all the time to win.
If you put that time into something else more useful in your life, you would progress and actually do something.
Well, yes, unless you're at the top of this top. If you're one of the best fantasy football players in the world, you can make $1 million.
Yeah, I mean, I guess some people find like entertainment. Like I like playing golf, or others like playing video games, or people like doing other things. I mean, it's not any more wasteful than spending time on Instagram or on Nintendo Switch. But yeah, I don't really need to pick up another hobby like that.
Yeah, I agree. I'd rather do this podcast on Saturday morning than get news about every player that might be injured or whatever, might be sat out because of something.
I mean, we've talked about, I don't know if we talked about this on the gambling show, but would you rather bet on sports directly or do fantasy?
I'd rather do neither. I can never pick anything in sports. That's why I like watching it, because I don't know what's going to happen unless the Browns are playing somebody.
All right. Well, we'll end the show there.
Yeah. Hey, write us some comments on YouTube and or Reddit and or Twitter. We're easy to find.
On iTunes.
And yeah, write reviews on iTunes. We're almost at what, 10 or 11 or 9 or something. I don't know.
We're close to double digits, if not there.
Yeah, and nobody writes iTunes reviews, so that's really good that we're almost at 10. We're way above that on actual listens. So I know that somebody's listening to this right now that hasn't written an iTunes review, and we'd really appreciate it if you did that. And if you have suggestions for the show on things like who should we have on, what topic should we talk about, should Nick wear his Laker colors suit opposing me, like just give us some feedback. Is that it,
Yeah,
Nick?
I need to get a Lakers colored suit. I mean, I have a suit and I have Lakers colors, but not both.
If you want to give Nick a Laker colored, a bright purple fuchsia, whatever that color is suit, you know, let him know. I'm sure he'd take it. Give you his sizes. Okay, guys. Until next time.